So assessments and reading. As we talked about, when you folks are brainstorming your lessons, why do we assess reading? Well, McKenna and Walpole identify 4 different types of assessments: screening, progress monitoring, diagnostic, and outcome. As teachers, you're mainly doing progress monitoring. You're checking to see if students learned what you taught. But you're also checking to see, did you teach what you thought? You know, you have to use assessments as reflections on your own practice, not just on what your students learn. Screening assessments are basically, they're brief measures to identify which students are at risk. And those are different from diagnostic assessments, because a diagnostic assessment, that's a comprehensive system designed to get down to the nit and gritty, get the show on the road, and figure out exactly where they might be coming into sources of difficulty. I got a song stuck in my head. And outcome measures, they're like third-year summative assessments. End of the year kind of, or your PISAs, your CMTs, or even just your finals. Now you want to compare students at grade levels. Are they reading at X grade level? Or are the students in Derg C compared to other schools in Derg C? All right? But mainly as a teacher, you're working on progress monitoring. So those myths, did anybody think they had some? I think you had a great one, I heard.
I just thought, oh, maybe it's a waste of time.
Yes, thinking that assessments are a waste of time is a myth. That there's too much assessment is a myth? Maybe not. Maybe there is a little too much, but that's, again, soapbox, personal opinion. But they are definitely not a waste of time. Was anybody else able to brainstorm a myth? Yes, sir.
Not accurate.
That they're not accurate, valid, or reliable. Yes, the word you're looking for is you want to know if the scores are valid and reliable, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this would be one, but maybe that's only supposed to be at the end of the unit.
Yes, and it's only at the end of the unit. That's a good myth, that you would only give an assessment at the end. We talked about, you two were talking about benchmark assessments and progress monitoring assessments. You do those repeatedly. So some basic myths, and we got some scary vocab words in here. All claims that a measure is scientifically based are valid. You will see this all the time. If you're evaluating reading programs or anything like, heck, toothpaste, you'll see, 3 out of 5 scientists agree, or scientifically valid. But you'll see that a lot in reading research. That, this reading program is scientifically based. That scientific basis is not all equal. It is not equally valid. The next one. A valid and reliable measure is equally valid and reliable for all examinees. An assessment might be valid and reliable for one group of examinees, but not another, i.e. English language learners. Okay. Are we familiar enough with the terms valid and reliable from our assessment classes? Basically, valid is, this is in a super nutshell, really condensed version, like fortune cookie condensed, smaller than Twitter condensed. Valid is the idea that it's measuring what you want it to measure. And reliable is the same person would get the same score over and over again on the same measure. The third one is all measures on the same reading component yield similar results for the same examinee. So by reading component, maybe vocab or comprehension or concepts about print, that, every vocab measure will give the same scores for the same examinee. Just not true. The lesson of these myths, reading assessment is difficult to do well. All right? All right. Another idea is that you can buy good assessments, and diagnostic assessments can come in a box. Kind of Or we've talked a little bit about formative and summative assessments. Diagnostic assessments are different. Can anybody remind me what a formative assessment is? Or try to? I mean, this is all new to you folks, so it's okay if it's you're off a little bit.
Standardized test.
Not as a formative, no, that's more of a summative, as those outcome measures. Standardized as really the outcome measure. To form something, what's that mean?
Would that be to like make the test to what you're teaching?
Yeah, to basically use that data to inform your teaching. Summative is that. And diagnostic, who remembers from last slide, a diagnostic test is what? Yeah, to identify specific breakdowns in reading. Summative tests, like the CMT, they come in a box, literally. They show up at your school in big boxes. But this idea that formative or diagnostic assessments just can come prepackaged aren't there. The idea that their main use is to identify reading disorders, no. We have to get away from this deficit model of reading. That it's not just a hole in someone's reading ability, but we're really using them they can identify areas of strengths as well, and areas of weaknesses. Just because you're weak in an area does not mean that you have a diagnosable reading disorder. It also gives it a negative connotation with students when they believe that they're taking this because, oh, they're in the dumb group. That assessments need to be administered by some kind of reading specialist. Not true. You are going to be certified pre-K or elementary teachers. You are the specialists. You have the content knowledge. You have the pedagogical knowledge. You will be able to apply that. And that diagnostic assessments have to be time-consuming and impractical. No. There are classroom strategies. How many of you have already seen people do them and doing some kind of assessment work in, what do? They usually have students doing a reader's workshop, and then might be at a table in the back working on a few assessments. So you develop a classroom system so it goes into your regular workflow. And you have to develop your workflow as a teacher so that it works for you. When we think about types of assessment, okay, this is just your curriculum, your instruction, and your assessment have to work together. So when we're considering our types of assessments, we need to keep this kind of in mind. That good teaching relies on good assessments, good curriculum, and good instruction. So, some types of reading assessments. Oh, brainstorm. That's what I want to do on these picture slides now, I remember. They're my fun brainstorm slides. Types of assessments. Let's hear them. Reading assessments. Writing records, yes. Miscue analysis. Good job. What else?
Verbal skills.
Verbal skills, yes. What else do we have? You're not going to find any notes because this is our first time on this lecture. Okay, yeah, maybe doing something with some kind of levels of phonological awareness. We can do something with that. We're actually going to look at some different of those tests. Yes?
Can it be like comprehension?
We could give comprehension quizzes or tests.
Fluency?
Fluency tests, yeah, which is also you get from your running records.
Writing samples.
Writing samples. Using writing assessments as a form of comprehension assessment. Most often than not, we actually evaluate reading comprehension by using writing to assess. Which, think about how complex of an issue that becomes. Because now are you assessing their writing abilities or comprehension abilities? Or are people that comprehend better writers, or people that better writers, better comprehension? What is someone to do? Well, we'll talk about how hard and difficult it is to assess comprehension in writing. Some types of reading assessments. As a teacher, your most powerful kind of reading assessment is by observation. You can look at a kid and know what they're doing. Are they understanding? Do they know what they're reading? It is the most common and probably the most powerful assessment that you're going to use. And you can take anecdotal notes, walking around your students read. Anybody who's taken 308 with me, Children's Literature and Literacy, knows how much I stress conferring with both young readers and writers. And that should be the cornerstone of your classroom. You can use checklists with your students. You can use rubrics, miscule analysis, you're running records, doing different portfolios, developing a reading or writing portfolio, specifically a reading portfolio. Conferences to me is so important I put it up there twice, actually. And then high stakes testing. These are just some kinds of reading assessments. Now, today though we're talking specifically about diagnostic assessments. And according to Michael McKenna, who I've stolen many of these ideas from, they're given in tandem with the screening test. Remember how we defined screening tests? From that first slide? What's a screening test do?
Measures the students that are at risk for.
Yeah, like my son's in kindergarten right now. The first 5 days has been screening test after screening test after screening test. But that doesn't give us the data. It just says it's just your red flag. But it doesn't tell you, what the violation on the field is. That's a bad analogy. A, because in football the flag's orange, and B, reading isn't a violation. But you get the point. It just says that there's something going on, but it doesn't give you clear-cut reasons. So you use the screening to see if there's a pattern of difficulty. You then take those students that have a pattern of difficulty and you use a diagnostic test to identify what other needs you use to help that child read. What can you do with that child? Is she struggling with phonological awareness? Or is she struggling? What can you do as a teacher to help? So, kind of a workflow. Again, from McKenna, 2011. Give a screening test. Okay, there's a problem. Then you give a diagnostic test to determine if what the skill need is. You identify the problem. Yes, ma'am?
For a second, I missed the second.
Okay. You give a screening test. That's just is there an issue with the student's ability to read? You identify that Monica has, she has issues. But you don't know what those issues are yet. That's what we're getting to now. So now that we know, and Monica, I hate to pick on you, look at you. What? Oh, the last slide.
Yeah.
To determine the specific needs. So we're going to use the diagnostic test to determine Monica's specific needs. So we figured out that it is Monica struggling with her decoding skills, and now I've come up with some kind of plan for Monica, and I will give Monica then progress monitoring tests periodically to see if we're teaching her that issue. See how the system works? It's like a 1, 2, 3. And these ideas are based on the cognitive reading model. So if we looked at reading comprehension here, please do not try to recreate this. If you want this, you can go just steal the image. I stole the image. And I will post this to Blackboard. Reading comprehension is basically, now I talk about strategy knowledge, and we talked about the difference between declarative knowledge, procedural knowledge, conditional knowledge, language comprehension, and automatic word recognition. Okay. Language knowledge includes like vocabulary and background knowledge. That stuff's really hard to assess. Especially with diagnostic assessments. And we'll talk about them. You can assess that, but that's just a measure of how they do on that item. But if I give you a vocab test, does it tell me all the vocab you know? No, it just tells me how well do you know the words that I gave you. Background knowledge. How can I possibly know that how can I possibly design a test to tell me all that you know about any specific subject? It can't be done. Word recognition, though, however, we can look at fluency in context. So, can you read something? If you can't do that, then we look at how you decode your sight words, decoding and sight words, and your knowledge about how to read, which can break down into concepts about print and your phonological awareness. But you need all of this for reading comprehension. And if you're interested in the picture, I think that's Michael Presley, no longer with us, but a great thinker in terms of comprehension strategy instructions. So, a student scored low on a survey of fluency. What should you do? The student, you gave him a piece, he scored low on his fluency measure. What do we do next? Go to the next level down, exactly. That slide is way out of place. Yeah, you would go to the next level down. But that slide was supposed to come much later. Some concepts of print. Now I'm going to go over some of the assessments that we talked about. Assessments, and we'll return to what Matt is talking about, and we'll walk through that student again. These are from your readings this week. There's actually a table. The observation survey of early literacy achievement and the concepts of print test. We are actually going to look and evaluate teachers as they administer the concepts of print test. Maybe I'll turn my son into a guinea pig and do it with him so we have something to watch. All right. You can also assess phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. And again, phonological awareness, you're talking about sounds of language, the structure of the language and the sounds. And phonemic awareness, that there's individual sounds that can be analyzed and manipulated. So you break them down into individual sounds, individual bits. So if you wanted to measure phonemic awareness, you can look at multiple measures with adequate content coverage for the domain. And yes, today's like the overview, and over the next few classes we'll go over like, this is how you do concepts of print assessments, this is how you do phonological awareness, this is how you do phonemic awareness, this is how you do, we'll go through them more broad. We talk about the stages of literacy development. You want to make sure that the measure matches their stage of literary development. I mean, a fifth grader A phonemic awareness assessment, probably not a good match. A lot of these have to be done one-on-one, these assessments. And they're usually with oral responses. They're not written. Why? Do not overthink this question. Why isn't a phonemic or a phonological awareness test written?
Because they're just learning how to read and write.
Yes, and it's supposed to be measuring sounds, and so they wouldn't be written. And we're gonna partner up, and you're gonna practice giving these assessments to each other. And you need training. More beyond this little class in diagnostic assessments, more beyond the concept of print tests that you're gonna have, beyond a lot of training. So some phonemic awareness tests. The dynamic indicators of basic urban literacy skills, phonological awareness literacy screening, and the Yacht-Singer test of phonemic segmentation. And that's the one we're going to use in this class. Guys, and these are all literally written right from the chart in the chapter of your book. So if you missed them, or if you don't want to write them down, please feel free. You don't have to. What about fluency? Well, running records we talked a lot about, but you do fluency checks. There's also informal reading inventories and dynamic indicators of basic literacy skills. And in this class, we're going to be doing a lot with running records in MISQ analysis. You should hopefully leave here being able to do a running record at an acceptably bad level. It's hard. It's really hard to do well. What about vocabulary and comprehension? I talked about this. You can assess them, but not for diagnostic assessments. But you can look at outcome measures, or maybe a screening measure of vocab, or a screening measure, or an outcome measure of comprehension. But there isn't really a great way to do a diagnostic assessment of comprehension. Why? Think about vocabulary. Think about that cognitive model of comprehension that we just showed. Why would it be difficult to come up and, let's start here. What's the definition of the purpose of a diagnostic assessment? Not diagnose a child with a learning disability. That's not what we're doing. That's one of the myths. Yes, to see where the skill deficiency is, where we can help them. So why do you think we cannot do that with vocabulary comprehension? Anyone want to take a guess? Yes, ma'am.
Well, a student's comprehension would be different based on their background.
Yeah. How could you know where the hole is in their background knowledge or in their? That's basically fundamentally why you can't. There's not great comprehension measures, and there aren't any diagnostic comprehension measures. You have no idea where the breakdown is. Is it in their strategic knowledge? Is it, which is a whole subset of skills? Comprehension and meaning making, that's like the whole picture. So it's hard to figure out exactly where something could be going wrong. All right. Phonics assessments. There's two major kinds of assessments. You could give them to assess the ability to associate a sound with a given symbol, and I put up, here's a checklist. Where are they in their short vowels, their initial consonants, their digraphs, their double consonants, their blends, their phonograms, their long vowels. The second type, and these are used very frequently, use nonsense words. And you might give them a list of nonsense words that involve certain patterns and you want to see if they could get them correctly. So you might give them a word, it might be on the test, SHOY. How should that be pronounced? Shoy. But you give them nonsense words to see, and that's a very common method. So all of these diagnostic assessments, they fit in this idea of RTI, or response to intervention. Anybody familiar with this at all, or being in a school where you sit, where you're all of a sudden be like, oh, it's our RTI period, which doesn't really the best way to do it, but what do we know about it? Anybody have any? Yes, ma'am?
Usually, well,
You work in school, right?
I worked as a para. I was a reading specialist para actually.
Oh, perfect. So you know more about this than I do.
And usually they don't involve paras in that, but I worked a lot with small groups. So the RTI would be like the teacher, the reading specialist would all get together, look at all the diagnostic testing that we've done, and see what they need to do to help that student.
And why would I have maybe come up with these different tiers? Did you guys do a tier system?
We had tier 1, 2, and 3.
And tier 1, which is the biggest tier? Whole group. Tier 2? Yeah, and tier 1? Individualized. Now, and this is this idea that, you know, almost everybody is involved here in whole group instruction, and you identify some cases, but I like to do whole group kind of for both of these. So during small group time, you're still pushing, like everybody can be better readers. And that's my only quip with this idea that it's this intervention. To me, intervention's a show about crazy drug addicts on A&E. And this idea that reading is this problem that needs to be solved. I've really never liked the title. And I'm on soapbox here. But, you know, like, why is it about personal growth rather than some kind of intervening? Intervening means it's a problem. Same thing with the word diagnostic, like I said, diagnostics. It just, to me, creates a mindset that it's never jived well with me. It kind of like kicks me in the gut a little bit. But it is what it is. And a lot of schools use it. So this is where I steal my ideas from, is Mike McKenna and Sharon Walpole, and I spelled her last name wrong. Oh no, I didn't. L's still there. But instead of doing different sizes for tier 1 and tier 2, everybody's in tier 1 and tier 2. That you do differentiated small group instruction. And I've seen this done multiple different ways. Some schools actually have, they'll have RTI period, where everybody goes to their groups. Other times, you've seen with me, I've integrated into my reader's workshop, where I'll have different groups working on different things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a triangle, but maybe like a 2-tiered pyramid. And it always goes back to those diagnostic assessments. It's just what you're saying. The reading recovery teacher, the reading specialist, the classroom teacher, and you got involved and you looked at diagnostic assessments. And you figured out where to help kids. So let's go back to Monica's example now, where we started. Remember the question before we looked at all the different kinds of diagnostics assessment. You gave a child a fluency screening and they didn't do well. What happens? Well, if they're fluent in their oral reading fluency, you focus on building their vocabulary and comprehension. That's them reading. That's, what do I say about vocabulary and comprehension? The only way to really build it is through quality talk and quality analysis of text. But no. So you go down. Maybe you check their decoding skills. All right? If they've mastered most of their decoding skills, then you have a fluency issue. So you're going to work on building up their fluency and their comprehension in small groups. How you can build a comprehension without vocabulary, it's beyond me, but. All right? Is the child at benchmark in decoding? Like at grade level, at whatever your district determined or state determined level for decoding. Yes? Again, vocabulary and comprehension. No. Then you're giving a measure, diagnostic test in phonological awareness. All right. If that's true, then you're focusing on word recognition and fluency. No. Then you're focusing on phonological awareness and word recognition. It is an assessment system designed to improve instruction. Now, diagnostic assessment is just one. So, how does that work? Well, select resources that address that need based on that flow chart. You can group children with that similar needs. So, based on that flow chart, that was just one example. Then you give targeted instruction in that area for 15 minutes a day. Wow. Dr. McVeary, you're harping back to mini lessons again and again. You keep beating us. Yes, I will. I will constantly beat you over the head with this idea of these like little 15-minute differentiated points of instruction. And then you can go back and you can re-administer a diagnostic test and you can see if they responded to that, whatever you're working on with them, and then adjust. It's using assessment to improve your instruction and to improve your students. That's the goal. We're not assessing the test. We're not testing to just because our bosses tell us. We want our students to learn.